The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau. But first, this week's one-on-one in 10 with economist Cameron Bagrie. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Evening. Nice to be here.
Comrade, normally our economists, business journalists and commentators are all cheerleading the animal spirits of free market capitalism, but you have bucked that trend and written a damning indictment of where you think the New Zealand economy is headed and the massive headwinds coming our way. Your three main points are the Middle East is a subset of the biggest geopolitical and geostrategic picture, the shift from the Great Moderation to the Great Transition, and populism as angst drives political blowback. Do you think Kiwis comprehend the enormity of the global forces now influencing our economy?
I think you probably over-dramatise what I've actually written, right? But I think you're part way there, because what's going on at the moment is an awful lot of tension between what's called the short term and the long term. So in the short term, we've got real economic pain in the form of rising inflation. And guess who inflation hurts? It hurts the poor. So you can guess who the poor are going to vote for. And then we've got these big transitional shifts that are going on. We need to restore productivity within this economy. You know, productivity drives well-being, that drives your economic base. There needs to be a common sense bit of economics about things. There's a whole lot of tectonic shifts that are going on around the globe. So we're sort of caught between the short term versus the long term. And we've got an economy that's going from what's called the Great Moderation, which is, the Great Moderation is a term to describe what happened between 1993 and 2020. We're now in the Great Transition. And that transition involves a lot of change. The next 20 years is not going to be like the last 30. It's not going to be a bad 20 years, but it's going to be a different 20 years. And we just need to get our heads around some of those structural shifts.
Iran have made it clear they intend to toll the Straits of Hormuz. Many commentators have described Trump's war as the greatest geopolitical blunder since invading Vietnam. Do we need to accept a new global economy with a new premium on everything that passes through that strait? How much will that fuel, do you think, global inflation?
Well, Hormuz is a subset of a bigger global picture. And the bigger global picture is that, MFAT, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 2023, they came out with navigating a shifting world, and they had some key themes. Is that, guess what? Power now trumps rules. Guess what? It's not about just in time, it's about just in case. And guess what? It's about security in food, energy, and technology. And it's only been 2026 that we're starting to see the government actually come out with using those lines in regard to the world's a different place. But if MFAT's talking about in 2023, then the narrative probably started in 2019, 2020. So this sort of stuff. What we're seeing in Hormuz is a subset of what we're seeing in the Ukraine. It's the big tug of war between the United States versus China. It's not a bad world. It's just a different world. It's a little bit more like the 60s and the 1970s, just a little bit more volatility.
You note the great moderation to the great transition. How concerned are you about China and American competition in the Pacific?
Well, when you see China launching a missile, it sends a bit of a message in regard to what's going on. And China's a $20 billion export market, and America's 9.5. Well, I'll give you a heads up. If push comes to shove, we're going with the Yanks. We ain't going with China. So there's a threat here. And talk to anyone in Australia as to what happened a few years ago when Australia upset the Chinese, and all of a sudden, wine exports into China found there was a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So we've got a delicate balancing act. We're playing Switzerland in regard to what's going on here.
Do you think that Winston's comments, which have been denounced as racist, do you think that helps with that balancing act with China?
Well, no, it doesn't. But let's be honest. If you look at what's going on around the globe at the moment, there's a rise in what we call national conservatism. We're
Hmm.
seeing it in the UK. We're seeing it in Australia. And you play the nationalist card, ownership of state assets. You have a pushback against immigration. Yeah, Winston's playbook is what's happening across the Tasman in Australia with a certain politician over there,
Yeah.
pulling against him, right? So the politics worldwide are playing into this. And I tell people at the moment, it's almost like we've got a certain modern day version of Rob's Mob of the 1970s and the 1980s. If
Yes.
you go back to the 1970s, the 1980s, Rob's Mob with these, disaffected working class people that found their real wages were going backwards. They jumped from Rowland, they jumped to Muldoon. Well, we've got a whole group of Rob's Mob at the moment. It's the younger generation. It's the female vote
Yes.
that they're going. It's the older generation. You've got all these groups of disaffected people, and we're seeing it coming through with the likes of support for the Opportunities Party.
Mm.
Your people are just like, no, well, I've had enough. Your Labor and National, your centralist party vote, they're combined getting about 60% of the vote,
Yes. Yes.
which means the rest is getting 40.
Unemployment is up, house values are down, and business liquidations have soared a massive 71% in the 3 years under National. New Zealanders look to their governments for solutions. When does this become a political problem for National?
Well, it's already a problem, but the economy is transitional. Our old economic model of selling more expensive houses to each other, well, those days are done and dusted. Yeah, immigration, yesterday's story. Yeah, tourism-led growth. Well, tourism is still at 93, 94% of what it was pre-COVID levels. Yeah, we're embracing on a different economic model. You go down to Canterbury, Otago, and Southland,
Hmm.
and you get a completely different economic vibe to what you get in Auckland and Wellington.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're actually seeing an export quality, income-led recovery, which is actually a good thing. And it's just taking a little bit of time. And as I said, it's part of the big economic transition as to what's going on.
Economist Bernard Hickey argues the austerity program the government has embarked upon worked in the 90s, early noughties, and 2010s because private debt was so low. He makes the point that households are swamped with private debt now and can't afford the extra the government are loading up onto them. Is he right? Is the entire strategy of the government wrong?
Well, we haven't seen fiscal austerity yet. The government in the 2024, 2025, and 2025, not the 2026 budgets, but they actually injected more money into the economy than what they were stripping out. So all the fiscal savings are backloaded into the fiscal forecasts. So any government at the moment is in an absolute fiscal straitjacket in regard to delivering on going to surplus. So it's going to be interesting to see. I call it the you got what's called the trilemma.
Hmm.
Governments. What do you want to do? You want to return to surplus? You want to inject money into public investment infrastructure, and you want to maintain the value of core government services. Well, you can do 2 out of 3. You can't do 3 out of 3 unless you're prepared to raise taxes. Which political parties are prepared to be honest and say, well, look, we're going to raise taxes. So I don't have a problem with raising taxes as long as I'm getting bang for my buck.
For many, their greatest asset is their house, but with valuations flattening, it no longer provides the security it once did. You warn of populism as angst drives political blowback. How do you think that economic insecurity will manifest when people are feeling poorer?
Well, we're already seeing it at the moment. You're seeing it at the polls in regard to what's going on. The fact that you've got a politician such as Mr. Henry has come out, and what's he decided to play into? Populism. Well, this is what goes on when you get big structural changes across your economy within society. I.e., we're dealing with old issues. We're dealing with big structural change, demographics. We need to shift the whole economic model, you get a society that's grumpy.
Yeah.
And it's not just in New Zealand, it's in the United States, it's in the UK, it's in Australia, and it plays into populism politics where we call it promise me nomics. You get out there and you promise me something that people think's going to work. Well, guess what? Odds are it ain't going to work.
Finally,
But it's promise me nomics in regard to where things sit.
Finally, comrade, with 2 more OCR rate rises predicted before the election and the economic impact of a super El Nino not yet factored in, do you think the economy can turn in time for the election for National?
I actually think the economy is in a little bit better shape than what's been openly acknowledged. I think the National Party's issues are far more than the economy. And let's be honest in regard to what's going on in the next sort of 24 hours.
Yes.
Right? You just have a look at what's happened in the past week.
Yeah.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the economy. That's about, the people in New Zealand are pretty straight shooters in regard to, and you can make a few mistakes, but you can't make a couple in a week.
Right. Do you think finally, do you think Prime Minister Luxon is safe tomorrow?
I won't express a view on that, but what I will say is that the National Party needs to be an awful lot better about communicating what their economic strategy is.
Thank you, Cameron, for your insight and your oversight. Cheers, comrade.